The good news is that India is through to the quarterfinals of the FIDE World Women's Team Championship. We had great chances to win against Russia, but we won against Armenia 2.5, 1.5, and against Russia we lost 3-1. I think in at least two positions we were very close to a win against Russia. More on that in a bit, so I'll now start showing you the games. First, I have the game between Harika Nawali and Elena Danielian, and here her opponent opted for French, and Harika came up with a novelty on the 11th move with c4. I think this is a very nice move, has not been played before, and the point is after bishop g7 she wants to take cd5, and in this position after knight e5 I think she could have simply played knight c3 to keep the tension going, and after knight f3 bishop f3, if queen g5 then just queen d3 and then rook d1. This was one way to keep the pressure, but after cd5 knight e5 she immediately took knight e5, and this gave black chances to play for equality after queen g5. I think after this position white did not really have a big advantage, and the game pitted out into a draw. So maybe because of this pawn on d5 we can say white is slightly better, but I'm not sure if that's enough to get a complete edge. And after a few moves they repeated and this game ended in a draw. Next we have the game between Lilith and Vaishali, and in this game after c4 e5, knight c3, knight c6, knight f3 f5, there comes a very unusual move in this game after bishop to h3, which is a novelty. Now in this position after bishop h3 black could probably play castles and just leave the pawn on prey. The point is if knight b4 then there is this knight b4, and if white takes knight takes f5 then you can play something like knight h5, and if bishop takes f5 then black could play bishop f5 followed by knight g4. I think there is some chance for black here. I mean white would definitely not take the pawn on f5, but if it takes then black has great winning chances. So this was something that Vaishali could have played, but she played g5 in this position, overlooking a very nice idea by white. White has a nice move in this position, and her opponent played it with queen a4. The point is that the bishop on b4 is now hanging, knight into b4 is threatened, and if black plays bishop to c5 in this position then white has a brilliant move d4, opening the eyes of this bishop, and if e takes d3 then bishop g5, and here let's say if black feels that black could take bishop to f2, then white will not capture the bishop because of this knight check. White will not capture the bishop, but white will play king f1, and then if you take the pawn white will not touch the pawn, white will not touch the bishop, white will go king g2, and this is a great position for white. But after queen a4 in this position Vaishali went for g takes h4, and after knight b4 bishop d7 the positions that she got was very unclear, but white managed to stabilize and consolidate, and after a few moves white was completely better. Though the king is in the center, the activity that black has is not enough to disturb the coordination of white, and eventually Vaishali lost. Next we have the game of Tanya Sestev versus Anna Sargsyan. I think she played a very convincing game right from the opening. She played like the entire game was almost already played in 2017 until 18th move. So she played a new move on the 18th move, and I think her opening preparation was top notch in this game. Well, I'm just going to the critical position after knight f3 gf3. This is the position I wanted to show you. Here white has previously played king b1 in 2017, but in this game Tanya played f4, and after bishop g7 she played king b1 and then got e5. I think this strong center really helped white to like increase the advantage to a great level, and not only these pawns but also h4 h5 is in the air, which Tanya does ultimately. After rook c8 rook c1 she goes h4 h5, and this is a strong attack. The only concern for the spectators was the time of Tanya, because she was down to less than a minute according to the broadcast. And here, I mean, she clinched. I really want to show you the last point after d6, rook d7. She played bishop f5. The point is that she wants to push this rook away from the 7th rank, and rook takes d6. There is rook g7, and she won the game. I think in the entire game, it was. It's also okay to say that this was a one-sided game. Throughout the game, she was better, and ultimately she clinched it. Next, we have the game between Susanna Gabian versus Bhakti, and her opponent played the Reti system. What I want to show you is this position after rook d2. Until here, Bhakti really played convincing chess, and after g5, rook d1, she had to probably find the only way to continue, which is knight 3 f4, or let's say knight f4, and then to keep this with rook into d4. This would have given a safe and sound advantage for black, because after cd4, black can take knight takes f4. The rooks are passive, they don't have a target, and black bishop can come to e7, this can come to f5, and black is doing great in this position. But in the game, she survived a slight scare, you can say, because after knight f4, gf4, knight f4, h4, she played knight g2 in this position, and her opponent had a way to make a comeback in the game, and the move here is at g5. This knight on g2 is more like Abhimanyu, it cannot come back, but at the same time, black cannot afford to take this pawn, because after h5, white has king g2, and this rook on d1, which had no target, now has a major target on the h5. So this would have been really scary for Bhakti, but after knight g2, her opponent played king g2, which meant that Bhakti was back into the game, and then after a few moves, she won the game, because there is rook g8 coming and the knight hangs. Now coming to the match against Russia, in the game against Gorachkina, Harika employed the semi-slav, and in this position after f6, Alexandra Gorachkina employed h4, and this was a novelty. Previously, rook a d1 was played by Anton Korobov against Anish Giri last year, but after f6, Gorachkina played h4, and it was remarkable the way Harika defended this position very patiently. She first played queen f7 and then played c5, and there's another critical moment, I think, which can be considered as a test for all of you. After h4, I think this position, let me just check. Yeah, it's this position after queen h4. It's black to move. What will you do as black? I think it's a very instructive moment. If you're not really careful, then you might lose the thread here. In this position, as black, it's important to play h6 to stop any counterplay, which Harika Nawali did in the game. After bishop c4, she played king h8, and at regular intervals, she was able to exchange pieces and keep the balance. She also improved the position of a bishop, and for a moment it looked scary because of this passed pawn on d6, but she kept it all under control. After king f1, bishop c8, bishop d7, the game was in control. It felt like now the position is better for white, but it was not really clear how white could improve, and there was this moment where I was really scared. After queen c7, I thought it's like knight e5 is coming and d7 is coming, and it seems like black is losing, but Harika had seen this remarkable idea to play queen d5, and the point is that if white plays queen e7 to facilitate knight e5, then black has queen d4 check followed by queen g1, which ensures that black at least gets a perpetual. So after knight e5, she took the pawn, and then it was a draw. I think that was a really nice save by Harika. And next game we have is Vaishali versus Alexandra Costinuic, and this was the position she got. Just so heavily winning. Even rook d4 in this position would have been good. Idea is to get the rook to g4 and then knight to h4, and then also take the a6 pawn. But okay, even in the game, this is still okay. She got the move that she played was also fine, and she got great position. And this was, I think, the turning point. From move number 22 to 33, I think she was really doing great. And suddenly after this position, she went for the exchange of queens, and she could not really accommodate to the change in the position, because now white has to be really careful. Though white has an advantage, white has to slow down and keep an eye on what the opponent is doing. But I think by this time she must have already consumed a lot of time, and suddenly it was not so easy. And just in a matter of few moves, the evaluation has changed from +4 to just equal or slightly better only. So that also tells you about the kind of change that took place in this game. And then it felt like black is taking over, and in time pressure she made another blunder, eventually losing a piece. For example, in this position, after king e2, rook e4 check came and she lost a knight. If instead of that, if she plays rook g7, I think it's still possible to keep the game going, but I think the mistakes were made much earlier, where she had such a heavy winning position, but and then she messed up a little bit and then eventually lost. So this was, I think, one position where we could have scored well. And then in the game against Katrina Legno, I think there's one moment only where where Tanya had a chance to equalize. It was this particular moment where she could have played rook d8, and the point is that if white plays rook d1, then black has queen e8 and threatening rook e1 checkmate. And then if white plays h3 to save the king, then you have rook takes pawn, or you can also take rook takes pawn, and then you can play this position. So this was the best chance for Tanya, but she could not find this. She played rook c8, and then after rook d1, her opponent just won because she's a clean pawn up. Or I mean, she won because of this passer. And after queen takes a6, in a matter of few moves, Katrina won the game. So I think this was again another game where we could have saved half point, I think. And then in the game against Marianne Gomes, Marianne Gomes was again heavily winning. Marianne Gomes was white, and the critical position is after knight fe4. I will give this position as an exercise. What will you do as white? Okay, in this position, white has a stunning move, queen takes knight, which is of course not so easy to see, but once you figure out the variations initially, then it becomes clear that the b pawn is pretty powerful. Point is that if d takes e4, then there is a rook d6 followed by bishop takes knight, and then b6 is threatened, so it has to take a b5, then knight e7 and rook falls. And if queen takes e4, knight takes e4, then you can take the d6 queen and then play b6 again. And white is better here as well. Rook d5 is coming very soon. The pawn on b6 is a legend. So yeah, so I think this was another game where we could have scored a full point, but after a lot of exchanges, white had two rooks for two knights. I mean, one rook for two knights, but it was not enough, and eventually the game ended in a draw. But yeah, on the bright side, if you see, India is through to the quarterfinals. We have another match against France, and after that there will be a playoff. I'll bring you more updates about the event. I hope you liked the highlights, and do like the video. Take care. Bye bye.